Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 47 of the podcast, and it's December 16th, 2021, as we record this. Our main topic today is planning for the new year. But first, let's check in. What's up?
Not a lot. Just drinking my morning tea and getting in the resolution mode, I guess.
The resolution mode. Yeah. I decided a long time ago to not resolution, but we'll get into that in our main topic. No. Yeah.
No resolutions. Well, what are you reading?
What am I reading? I am still reading Seed to Dust by Mark Hamer. He's the English gardener. So it's nature writing. But I'm happy to report that I have crossed the finish line. I have met my goal of reading 52 books in 1 year. So
wow, congratulations.
I'm super excited about that. I keep a book log in my planner, which I don't have that planner with me right now, but I keep it a running total in the back of my passion planner that has all the titles. And
you have a book with books where you keep track of your books. That's fantastic.
It is kind of meta.
Yeah, it is. Well, cool.
I like it.
Congratulations.
What are you reading?
I'm reading a book by Larry Mcmurtry, the author of Lonesome Dove. That's the only Larry Mcmurtry book I've ever written or ever read. Pardon me. And so now I'm reading something called The Last Kind Word Saloon.
Oh yeah, we have that in the bookstore.
yeah, I found it in one of the little libraries in the neighborhood. And my son is always pushing me to take books out of there. So when I found that, it seemed like a natural fit. So
is it a Western?
Yeah.
He all writes Westerns?
Yeah, he writes mostly Westerns, like modern and sort of traditional, I guess like traditional kind of cowboys and frontier. It deals with historical characters. There's some Wyatt Earp in it and Buffalo Bill Cody. I'm just going to say this is not a review podcast, but it's not very good. It's not. All the Goodreads reviews of it said it wasn't a great book, but it's not very good.
All right. Why is it that you don't like it? We should be more constructive.
Right. I will be constructive. The plot is just there's not a story. There's a lot of sort of scenes, there's vignettes of whimsical and quirky and some gruesome. I mean, there's some real violent stuff in it, but it doesn't there's no cohesive plot to it. I'm halfway through it. I can probably finish it in a sitting because it's very light reading. Chapters are very short, but I don't there's no drive to the plot. I don't know where we're going, and it on one hand it's entertaining because the characters are funny and interesting, but it's not I'm not what's going to happen next turning pages and
you like those kinds of stories.
I do.
So if someone were into more character study sort of vignette kind of things, then maybe that would be their jam.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing you're saying? Okay, cool.
Definitely. And if you like Westerns, I mean, Westerns are fun because it's just a different language and he's a great writer, which he comes right off the page. But Lonesome Dove was so good. It was just such a compelling epic. So anyway.
What about writing? What's your writing update?
Oh, that's a good one. I just finished the third draft of Chasing Shadows. So that's the follow-up to Permanent Shadows. That is in the hands of some editors. Nobody here. Just kidding. I got that done, and I'm just taking the rest of the year to sort of clean up my desk. Loose ends. I've got some book covers that I needed to complete. I have some, and I'm doing some planning. I'm going into 2022 with, a plan on trying to plan everything really, like what I'm going to blog about, what I'm going to, having a plan for everything. Cause I do find myself sometimes kind of putting together those things by the seat of my pants. And that takes a lot more energy than actually planning. So
yes, I agree.
And yeah. What about you?
Well, since you did the developmental edit on my manuscript in the summer, I've implemented your notes. I've completed a story rubric, kind of self-diagnosing my own memoir. And then the next step is revising according to those rubric notes. And then I like to edit in passes. I don't know if we've talked about that before, but after I do the rubric pass, then I'll do a settings pass and a sensory pass, make sure I've got all the senses in there, and kind of dive deep on some of that. And then of course I'll run it through Pro Writing Aid. There will be an affiliate link in the show notes. I dig Pro Writing Aid, and then I'll send it to a line editor.
So when you talk about passes, I find this interesting because I don't do that, and I feel like that's something I should do, particularly after this draft that I turned into you. I felt like I just had a sense that I needed to do a pass for things like the setting, because is the weather consistent? Was it raining 2 days ago? And then that kind of stuff can be really, that talk about like losing the forest and the trees in the forest. That can be one of those things that happen when you write a novel. And so I wonder, is that why you do that, is to be able to just clear out those different elements one at a time so you're not losing them?
Mostly, yes. That's probably the best way to describe it. I know that my setting is always weak, because when I write my rough draft, I just get the bones out, get the story out.
Right.
And I don't take time to settle into the setting. And so there's rarely any description of anything.
Right.
And I love reading setting in books, and I love reading that deep dive into a sensory experience in books. So I want to emulate that in the stuff I write. So I want to make sure that I'm paying attention and looking, did I bring the theme all the way through the book?
Right.
That sort of thing.
I think if I were to like characterize something that I like, a weakness in that, for me, it's always when talking about setting specifically, I always try to open a scene with defining setting. Okay, I'm going to really set the setting here. It's going to be that day in town. It's going to be that night at the bar. And so I think sometimes when I look at a draft, there's no ordinary days. There's a lot of dramatic introduction to scenes, and that can get a little fatiguing. It all starts to feel like, yeah, it just feels too much. So I think that I'm looking to find that balance between when the setting sort of mirrors the action in the story,
the emotional tone.
Right. And I don't have a sense for that at least at the pass I'm on now. I think that I was very self-conscious of that when I passed it on to you.
Well, do you have any announcements you want to do before we start in?
No, nothing really major. Like I said, it's just at this point a lot of planning and a lot of putting things into order, and hoping for better announcements next year. More exciting ones.
Well, my exciting announcement is the early bird pricing is in effect right now for the Writercraft Writing Workshop and Retreat. The tickets are for 3 days, 3 nights, all lodging, all meals, 3 speakers, lots of retreat time on the grounds. It's gorgeous out there. There's coaching, yoga, reflexology, community, social distancing. And so this early bird price right now is $680.
And where is there, Valerie?
There is Marcola, Oregon. It's at Teepee Village Resort.
Lovely.
It's glamping at its most amazing. And there's gourmet food, and it's just, I was married out there. It's gorgeous out there. It's on the Mackenzie River. Lots of awesome nooks to go right in, and a swimming hole, and it's pretty magical. I really like it out there.
And if you're not an Oregonian, or you're not from this part of the valley, the Mackenzie River is maybe the most picturesque place in this area. It's amazing. We were just talking about it over the weekend, about like beautiful rivers, and the Mackenzie came up, and yeah, it's a showstopper.
Cool. Well, good. The early bird price ends January 2nd. So that's coming up pretty close. And then it goes to the regular price of $840. And then I'll just do a little Patreon blurb here. The podcast is sponsored by our patrons at patreon.com/Valerie Eason, IHSAN. For as low as $1 a month, you can get a shout out on the podcast, and we can make announcements for you on the podcast too. So it's kind of a cool way to get some advertising for your own stuff. At other tiers, the benefits increase: free books, accountability Zoom calls, scene analysis, mastermind calls, and even free WriterCraft retreat tickets. Become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/Valerie Eson. Oh, and I did want to just mention a resource, because I'm going to be talking about Passion Planner and the book that I used to help plan my year. And I just wanted to say those out real quick. Holly Wharton wrote a book called The Year You Want. And then I use a Passion Planner for my planners for the year. And so I've got discount codes, referral links in the show notes as well. That's valerieeson.com/podcast-news. I think maybe I should get a smaller slug for that in the future, but that's what it is right now. Okay, let's get into the meat.
Let's talk about resolutions.
So you do resolutions. This is cool. Tell me why you do resolutions.
Well, I'm naturally a good goal setter. I do that. I do that on a micro level, on a sort of day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, and so it's natural for me to resolve for the year. I don't think of them as resolutions. I think of resolutions a bit more, a bit differently. But I do look at the new year as a time to make that, to start setting those new goals. And I think that it's just a natural time. I think that you can set a goal at any point and start working toward it. There's no right or wrong place, but I think it's just natural to come through the new year and say, all right, what do I want in this defined period of time? And I think it does help in some way to that feeling that a lot of people are doing the same thing at the same time. I think there can be some sort of good energy out there that helps pull you in there. So yeah, I like to get a part of that, and I definitely set resolutions for the year.
I do too. I do a yearly planning. I do a yearly review also, and just look back at all of the things that I have accomplished, because it's really easy for me to think, oh, I didn't get this done and I didn't get this done. And that totally fell off and I get really frustrated with myself. So if I can have an accounting of the things that I did succeed at the end of the year, then I feel much better about, myself as an entrepreneur.
Right.
And I guess I don't use the word resolution, because to me, a resolution is a big wish list and I don't actually focus on it. It's just oh, it'd be great if I could write that book,
Right.
And,
right.
And I don't like to use that resolution title, because those are the ones that people say, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then, 2 weeks later, they're not doing it. So I like those SMART goals, and I like the baby action steps. And to me, that seems a little more concrete than resolutions.
And so you do resolutions.
I guess I just don't call it that.
Well, right. And I like
to take it a step further.
I like that you said you did review, and to me, I think that's a key part of the whole process. And that if you're not looking back on the goals you set and your honest progress toward those goals, I think that then it becomes the resolution, that wish list thing. It's all right, I'm going to do this. And so I think that accountability is really important.
So do you want to talk about your process in planning for the year?
Yeah. So
what did you do when you were, or have you done it yet?
I have not done my resolutions for 2022 yet. I haven't done my planning yet, because I'm doing right now, I'm doing the review part of 2021. I'm looking at what I set out to do. And so when I make resolutions, what I do two things that are, three things if you include the review part. I do one that is very concrete, that is outcome driven. So I say I'm going to create this many. Last year, my resolution was to publish 4 books this year. Now I didn't say what, they had to be 4 novels. It just had to be, I had to put 4 books on the shelf. And for me, that was ambitious. It was on the outside of what I'd done before, but it was inside of what I felt like if I got my processes right, that I could accomplish. So 4 books was the goal, and I actually published 5 books.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. But then therein lies that I created, I look at the process too. That's always the resolution, that like that's the second part of it, is that there has to be a process goal that is not that is like, that is just I'm going to work this way. So this year the goal was I'm going to commit this chunk of time in my daily schedule, weekly schedule, to writing my books. So that was the process resolution. And I try to marry the process resolution, I'm going to write this much at this time, to the sort of outcome, numbers driven resolution. I'm going to create this many books, knowing that one is going to facilitate the other. And I think that especially for people getting started, that process resolution is really important, because if you've never produced one book, saying you're going to produce 4 is enormous. So start with the process. That's going to get you to the outside things, the numbers things. What about you?
Well, for the purposes of today's podcast, I did go ahead and do my planning, but I kind of,
the homework. This is a problem.
You didn't do your homework. I did it in a different order though, and I felt like there were some pieces missing, and I wasn't quite in the right frame mind for it because I hadn't done the review yet. So what I like to do is at the end of December, I like to do an end of the month review, and then I look back through the whole 12 months and do an end of the year review in my passion planner. And then after that, I like doing some more ruminating about the year itself. The Holly Wharton's book, The Year You Want, helps you kind of go through that process, looking at your past year and what worked and what didn't, and what you were proud of and what you wished you had more time for. And it's less about metrics and more about like the feeling of, how you felt about your year. Right. And I like that better, because I guess I'm not a metric-y person. Because all of the year in review stuff I've had in the past has asked like, right, well, how much money did you make? And what's your forecast for blah, blah, blah. And I get kind of like bogged down in that. And I don't like doing that. And it's more about the feeling for me, right, I guess.
That's where I think like emphasizing that process goal is more important, because if you set up the right processes, those other things come naturally as a result of that. Like there's, results are the byproduct of work. That's what I tell myself all the time. Like in a business, I do separate resolutions, and I don't say I'm going to make X number of dollars, but I look at, here's the processes that have worked. And they've gotten me here. If I increase those and I feel good about that, I have to trust that the process is going to, increase the things I want to increase and decrease the ones I don't.
Yes. So after I've done that, like processy review sort of for the previous year, then I like to do kind of a tarot spread or an oracle spread. And this might be too woo-woo for some of our listeners, but it's more about like, what kind of theme, what kind of intention do I want to set for each month of the year? And even if nothing comes of it, it's something that I can look at the beginning of the month when I'm doing my monthly planning and say, okay, that's right. This is going to be about new ambitions. Okay. So, what is that thing that I've been wanting to do that I've been putting on the back shelf? Let's dust that off and see what this is about. And maybe I can put some energy into it that month, and maybe something will happen and maybe it won't. So it's not really woo woo. It's just more,
right.
Let's look at this theme. And I did that before I did the review. So I'm kind of like, I don't know if this feels completely right and true. So I might redo the spread, but then I did do my passion roadmap planning, which I'll get into in a little bit.
I think opening yourself up to, I think the hard work is to me, that's the key, but I think you have to be open to the magic that can happen. I just think you have to leave yourself a lane there, because if everything is just knuckled down and you're not giving yourself over to the growth that's sort of invisible, like you can't see but you feel, you're not looking at a metric that tells you you're a better writer, or you're a faster writer, or you're clearer. You have to be open to those kind of magic moments, those things that are just happen without explanation, I guess.
I actually really like that about myself. I do that. I guess I was kind of censoring myself for the podcast, but as you can see from my background, if you're watching on YouTube, I've got a bunch of lists and very organized stuff over here on the whiteboards. And then I've got an altar that's actually kind of messy right now with oracle cards and, crows and candles, stuff like that, and crystals. So I like that I have both of that in my world and in my psyche. And I think it works for me. It's a good balance, I think, of the two energies.
And I think that's the key, right? If it works for you, if it feels like it works for you. I mean, that's one of the things when I talk to a lot of writers in my professional side. I talk to a lot of people who are, how do I get unstuck? How do I get started? How do I get moving? How do I get finished? And really, like, the only answer to that is what works for you. How does, you have to work with that person to figure out what works for them. And if it's a combination of the practical list building and a little bit of magic and a little, just that, I use magic sort of in a broad sense,
General sense, yeah.
just being open to like what is possible.
Mhm.
You have to, it's about you. If somebody is going to tell you how to resolve and how to make 100% guarantee this is going to work, then I would run away as fast as I could, because there's nobody who can tell you how something works for you except for you.
That's right. So what works for me, I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit now. First of all, I have two planners, one for personal stuff and one for publication, podcast, business stuff. So at the beginning of the year, I'm going to show you what this looks like. I do something called a roadmap. I don't know if you can see this or not.
Yeah.
So what I did was I start out with 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years. And sometimes I alter that a little bit and do 1 month, 3 month, 6 months, 1 year, and make it more concise. But I wanted a little bit bigger of a range this time. So 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years. So I go through and I set a timer, or sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just let it happen. And I write down all the things that, at this point, it's the wish list. What it is that I would love to have in my life or be or do. And I was really concentrating on business in this sitting. And so I came up with a few goals and I organized them according to podcast, publication, the retreat, and then speaking and teaching. So those are kind of the 4 realms for my author business. And so I set up, they're not goals yet because I haven't made them smart with strategic and measurable and actionable but they're a little bit more than a wish, For instance, in 3 months, I want to get my memoir to an editor. So that's not a wish. I'm planning on doing that, but I haven't actually broke it down into tiny steps yet.
Right.
So I went in, and then I picked, in the 3 month category, I picked one thing to work on for January, and that's the game changer. So I kind of mind map. My goal is to sell 4 more tickets for the retreat in January. Well, excuse me, in the next 3 months. That's what I want to do. Right. And then I mind mapped out all of the steps that it would take to do that. And then you can go even further. If you like this kind of process, you can add dates to all of those little things, those little action steps, and you can take those action steps and put them in your planner around the dates that you want to have them accomplished by. So, and I don't like using the word deadline because, well, it's kind of a creepy word. And also it gives people a lot of anxiety, me anyway. And so I usually use the word timestamp. I don't know where that came from or how I started. So I timestamp it, and then it becomes more like one of those road signs, like you're passing it and it's sort of a mile marker. Oh, that's right. I was going to have this done by now. Do I still want it to be done? Can it be done by now? No. Okay. Can I move the mile marker? That sort of thing. So it becomes less judgmental and more, oh yeah, you were going to do that thing. Just sort of a reminder. And that works better for me.
I think one of the things you're hitting on that resonates for me is that when you're being kind to yourself and being good to yourself about what those measurable things are, it's really hard to put, especially as a new writer, especially as someone who's figuring out the process and the results and all those things, if you call it a deadline and you miss it, that can create a real rift in that process, then
For sure.
so I think being open with definition and being open to yeah, right, timestamps. I think that's a really good way to put it. If you didn't finish that book by March 31st, end of quarter one, you didn't fail at something. You need to look at your process and say, okay, I didn't get where I wanted to go, why, and then move that forward. And you're not under any sort of pressure. There's nobody waiting on the other end. If there is, that's a different story. But for most authors, I think, who are starting out, there's nobody waiting on the other end. I meet a lot of people who are very hasty, like, oh, this has to get out, this has to get done. That urgency is good, but urgency that arrests process is not.
Yes, I agree. And I think having more of an open mindset about the goal. I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the episode, where you're in your process, like you said, you wanted 4 books to be published. And if a person doesn't know how long it takes them to write one book, then having that goal of publishing 4 books is unrealistic,
right,
at this stage, because they don't know even how long it takes to do one. And I have a hard time with setting unrealistic goals for myself. I do it all the time. I think things are going to take much faster than they are. And I do get stuck in that loop of why didn't I get this done, and feeling bad about myself. So being able to readjust, because life happens too, your kid gets sick, or you have to cover a shift for somebody else at your day job or whatever, and you just can't get. So not finishing the goal is not something to have you break down about. It's just,
it doesn't arrest the process that you're still striving toward the goal of finishing things. And that's why I use the term books. So like if I were starting out right now, if this was my first year going into writing, I would say stories. I'm going to complete 4 stories this year, because story can be short story, flash fiction, novella, novel. And I think part of that process that you have to learn as a writer, especially early on, is I have an idea. What is it? And then finding the right form for that idea is key, because I think anybody who's gotten down the road a bit as a writer, like you've started out writing a short story that became something more. You started out writing a novel that didn't get there. So being open to it's just a story. Get 4 stories finished, get X number of stories finished that you feel good about. And then you're loosened from they have to be 60,000 word novels. That's why I said books this year, because I like writing. I like the novella form. I like the 30,000 word. I like reading them because I can add books to my completed list on Goodreads. It's I check them off like crazy because they're half as long. Just kidding. But I like the novella. I think that if you're a self-publisher and you're putting out books, your readers like your stuff. You can write a 30,000 word book and an 80,000 word book and satisfy them just the same. So I think when I said books, I meant and that was part of the sort of alchemy in the process. What am I going to get in those 4 books? And it ended up being, 2 novels and 2 novellas. And that was fine. That was fine for me. And I'll be more ambitious after I've proven to myself I can get, I can get that 4 done. Maybe I can do 3 novels this year. Maybe not.
Well, that's a great place to wrap it up today, I think.
Is it? I think so. So when are you going to, well, let's talk about this. When are you going to do you said you were doing your review. When do you go in and do, are you going to do a full resolution pass? Are you doing that on your?
Well, I feel like I've already done that. I've set up, I've already planned out my whole year for the next 3 years, actually.
3 years?
Yeah, because I have, and I worked on the checklists for the memoir that I'm working on right now, what needs to be done with that. I do have a business master list that is more like, it's just sort of a download list.
Right.
And there are things on there that I could check off at any time. And others are more like, hey, I want to look into audiobooks for all my novels, like that's going to be years and years and years down the line, probably. So yeah, I have plenty of stuff to work on, and I don't break them all down into tiny little steps until I get to the place where that's my game changer. So I pick one thing to like focus on, one project. I'm more project oriented, and I found that I guess that's my metric. I finish projects. And that works better with the day job too for me, because if I have a word count goal and I don't get my word count goal met that day, then I feel bad about myself. But if I sit down for 2 hours and work on the novel, then I can finish that, And so that's kind of more of a metricy thing for me. I finish the time block, or I finish the project.
Right.
Hey, I wanted to put this in here really quick. Last episode, we talked about you not having spoken on for Willamette Writers more than once at the Eugene chapter. But what I was remembering is I've actually interviewed you on this podcast.
You have? Yes.
Yeah, I totally forgotten about that. I was looking for something yesterday, and I remembered that we interviewed you on episode 29. So if folks want to go back and re-listen to that was where you were talking about your talk on monsters.
Oh, right.
It was right before that. Yeah. So that was episode 29. And then also, since since we did talk about time blocking and goal setting in this episode, there is on this podcast in season 2, episode 18, about 15 minutes into the episode, I start talking about time blocking versus goal setting. So if folks want to get a little bit more about that, they can go back and listen to that episode.
Do that.
What about you? You got any plans for the new year yet? You said you haven't started making those plans yet. You're in the review stage.
Yeah, actually I have, I'm not doing any new writing for the rest of the year. I'm going to probably take a couple of days. I have a small outside of the house job that I do. I do some direct care. I'm not doing that the rest of the year after today. Today's the last day of that. So I'm going to use some of that time to do some planning. And yeah, by the time we meet again, I'll probably have the whole list put together, and I'll have a view on what I'm going to do. So yeah. And this is a fun time of the year for me. I kind of love the digging into what comes next. And if you don't do it as a business person, as a creative, I think you can spin your wheels a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And once I will say, once I passed that manuscript on to you, I felt there's been a tangible weight off. I feel lighter having passed that off, because I knew there wasn't going to be something else after that. I knew there was going to be this open time. And the last week and a half has felt fantastic. Not that writing is a burden, but sometimes writing in that, cycle can get tiresome. So what about you?
You're in the finishing energy, it sounds like.
Yeah, the finishing energy is great. Bask in it. What about you, next couple of weeks?
I have some travel at the end of the month. I'm working full time at the bookstore. And I have decided, I think that I don't think I'm going to do client work next December. I think that working full time at the bookstore and doing client work is not a great idea for me. So, and then also we have, some travel planned at the end of the year. We're going to go up to Port Townsend. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And visit some friends. Normally we just rent a house on the Oregon coast and they come to us, but we wanted to spread out some of the traveling for them. So we're going to go up. It's also cheaper for us because we're going to stay at their house.
Right. Well, you go to beautiful places between the Mackenzie River and Port Townsend. Yeah, beautiful places for you.
Well, there's a lot of travel that we haven't been doing because of the virus. So,
right.
So this was a safe way to do some traveling.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And next
Absolutely.
time we talk, we will be speaking about characterization, I think.
That'll be fun.
All right. Nice chatting with you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye now.